Hello, everyone, and welcome to this panel discussion defining the MLOps Playbook for Indian enterprises. In the aspiration of growth, reaching newer markets, and higher level of efficiency, businesses are embracing digital like never before. Now, with machine learning operations, better known as MLOps, they are combining the potential of machine learning, DevOps, and data engineering. All this to deploy and maintain ML systems in production. As a result, these businesses are able to improve their ROI on AI, ML, and analytics initiatives. However, current machine learning processes are still considered to be complex in nature, and while ML models are growing exponentially, less than one third of the pilot projects are into production. Hence, there is a need to test these limitations and find out what are the hurdles. But before that, let's find out more about what MLOps actually solves for, some use cases, and what can be done to move these pilot projects post the pilot stage. To talk about this and more, we have Cope Biswas, Assistant Vice President, AI/ML Implementation and Deployment Lead, Genpact; Swati Jain, Vice President, L2 Analyst, EXL; Sanjay Kukareja, who's Global Head of Technology, eClerks, and Advisor, NASCOM. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this panel.
Thank you. Thank you, Vaishnavi.
Gop, let's begin with you. What does MLOps actually solve for, and what gaps in the enterprises is it addressing?
Well, it is a very broader question. But actually, if you look into it, MLOps is basically not just a tool or not just a technology. It is basically a framework, right? It is a blend of technology. It is a blend of transformation. It is a blend of, upgrading yourself in terms of the technical stack. It is a blend of infra. So it covers everything, right? So what it solves for is basically that when you start, or the more people are starting or implementing using AI ML into their business, it is becoming very difficult to manage, maintain, right? And maintain the continuity of it, right? MLOps can solve this problem, right? That is just one part of it, because it also helps you to industrialize it. And when I say industrialize it, it makes sense. It makes sure that you make it available every time with the same behavior, right? And you are able to manage it, govern it, right, at the same time, right? So I think MLOps as a broader term solve or try to solve these problems, in the longer horizon of things, right? I hope I have answered your questions, Vaishnavi.
Yes. So yes, let's elaborate on the point of you saying that it industrializes. And I'll move to Swati now and ask her, Swati, in your opinion, what are the use cases of MLOps? And if you're working on the ground on it, what use cases are coming up in the enterprises for it?
Yeah, thanks, Vaishnavi. So just I'll also begin by elaborating on your first question also. Gope very well put it across about industrializing and saying that it is a framework, it's a blend of many things. So I would just want to elaborate a little bit on it, and then I'll move on to the use cases as well. So I would just say that MLOps, in terms of the problem it is solving, is scalability, alongside even the turnaround time, accelerating stuff. So what in terms of the use cases, what I've seen is that when some organizations, if they are just implementing a few models, 4-5 models, they might just stitch the various parts of the process. But when it is 50, 100, 200, 600, 1,000 models, then MLOps becomes useful. So that is where we are evidencing across variety of our clients, be it in financial services, media, retail, for various functions, be it customer service, marketing, finance, etc. So these are different areas where I'm seeing the industrialization of MLOps, though it is at a very nascent stage. So in some cases it is like at the exploratory level. In some cases it is at the implementation level. But but to see the success and to evidence the success, I think will take us still a few years to really see what happens. But overall, in terms of what I have seen is, as I mentioned, scalability, turnaround time, reduced cost, even the whole concept of repeatability of MLOps is also giving a way to even innovation, because different versions of models can be tried with speed. So even that aspect is coming. And also one more aspirational is the governance part of it. So there are many aspects of ML ops which make it compelling for organizations to explore and try it. And we're seeing it across the board, in nascent stages. Yeah.
Understood. So it is helping stitch processes, it is helping in innovation, it also helps in quicker turnaround on AI, ML, and those ROIs. And my understanding of what you said is, interestingly, the innovation is coming through, whatever in nascent stages though, is coming through in finance and media. That's interesting. Though historically, financial sectors have actually been at the forefront of innovation. That's interesting to understand. Sanjay, let's move on to you. Gop gave us the definition of MLOps, what it solves for, and Swati elaborated on the use cases. Now, what are the hurdles in the adoption, and why aren't the pilot projects moving into the later stages of production?
I think, I'll just kind of catch on to where Swati left. So running a pilot is very easy. You pick a use case from business, you have a little bit of data to kind of, train the model, see the output, and you're done with the pilot. The challenge comes in when you start moving into a production. So there's an entire cycle of model management, right? Where you keep on scaling up the model, you need to have governance around data, you have to keep on refreshing the output. You also have to see that the model does not decay, because the model might work today, it might not work tomorrow because of changing inputs, or you kind of missed out a couple of dimensions which are critical for the model to predict accurately. So this entire concept of model management becomes critical for the success of MLOps. And then obviously, having, Swati also talked about governance, having strong governance both around process and data. So you need to ensure that the data that gets ingested is of the right quality, right accuracy, and you can keep on enriching it. And similarly, the process, any change that happens in the process needs to go back and reflect in the model that you have built. Otherwise, obviously, the output will not be in line with what you expect to happen. So I would say, model management is where a lot of things end up breaking, because pre-model management is defining, is just running the pilot, doing a small pilot. And the other thing also we've seen is the challenging around the run phase of MLOps. Once you pushed it into production, then running the BAU part of it, which is one part is model management, and the second is entire infrastructure scaling, ensuring you have the right people both on the business side as well as on the data engineering and the infrastructure side. So the entire ecosystem needs to work after the model gets deployed and model moves into a BAU phase. And my experience has been, we've seen a lot of organizations starting all these projects with a lot of enthusiasm. But once they reach a BAU stage, then the core team kind of loses interest. They want to move on to the next flashy thing. Whereas, ensuring that this becomes a BAU and keeps on running it successfully is where most of the models end up dropping. That's why you have concepts around model decay and not having clean data to keep on working on. And then there are a lot of evolving guidelines, I would also say, which kind of which you also have to look out. The concepts of explainable AI. Your model should explain what it is trying to do. The concepts of responsible AI. You also have concepts of environmental and governance. How much compute do you kind of end up using in running the model for a long term. So all those external factors also play. I think there's a lot of discipline that is required, plus the entire governance portion that is required to make sure the your MLOps projects run successfully.
Understood, Sanjay. And before moving on to the governance issue, if we can talk a little bit about, in case of implementation, what are the pillars, and are there any infrastructure changes necessary or investment priorities that should come up?
So it is, most of these deployments that happen today. I can talk about the clerks and whatever we kind of discussed with the ecosystem is most of these deployments are cloud-based. So it is, you have a choice of dialing up and dialing down on the infrastructure. It is not that, you need a lot of CapEx to get started on anything. As far as, pitfalls during implementation, as I said, you should have the right team, both a sound representation from the business and a sound representation from technology. From technology, you should have a data engineering team. Then you also need to have an infrastructure team, because MLOps is just, is primarily an extension of AI ML with DevOps as a background. So I think as long as you have the right constituents of the team, and you have done the right investments in the infrastructure and application, you should be fine.
Yeah, so just to add to Sanjay's point, if you allow me, Vaishnavi.
Yeah, sure, Bob. I was coming to you only next. Yes.
Yeah. So just to add to Sanjay's point, right? It also depends upon, see most of these ML projects, which at least I have seen till now, this is not a standalone ML project. It is basically part of an ecosystem, right? So basically the model is part of a bigger application. So when we talk about the infra and pillars, it has to tie up with the overall application which we are trying to sell to the customer. So it also depends on that, what is this overall ecosystem, right? What is the ecosystem or platform setup which customer has, right? So if we say that, MLOps is linked with only one platform, one technology, one set of tools, that will be a very wrong statement, right? It all depends upon how we basically orchestrate this ecosystem, how we make sure that all the different pillars, which we call, right, that if I have to automate my pipeline, if I have to set up a governance pipeline, if I have to set up a monitoring pipeline, right, if I have to set up a validation pipeline, this all individual components or modules can be done using various tools and techniques. Some of them even can be traditional ones, right, using the CI/CD, Jenkins and all. Some of them are quite new aged, right, and we can also use as Sanjay said, right, most of them are cloud based. So there are SaaS services which are available which you can use, right? So ultimately it all depends upon where this model is going to fit into this overall ecosystem.
Understood.
Right. And I will also just add one more aspect to it, which is in terms of the pillars, the mindset and the leadership focus on it. So when that happens, because one is building these models piecemeal and one is operationalizing the whole process. So that is very important. While Sanjay did talk about the technical pillars of the implementation and also a little bit on the business pillars, leadership, mindset shift in the organization, this is also one very important pillar that I would mention. Another I would mention even the data centricity, focusing on that the right data is coming in so that the whole operationalization of the model is set for success. So that is another. And third, another important pillar is, and there are different aspects in the whole life cycle from design to develop to test to deploy and monitor. And then monitor also around retraining, which is a very significant part of the model operationalization process, that when to retrain, how many times to retrain, etc. So these are some of the things. Yeah.
As you rightly mentioned, yes, the data that you put in is the result that you get, of course, and then training the model becomes so essential at that point. Swati, stay with me because I would like to hear from you. Break it down for us, the governance for MLOps processes. What is the need for it and need for control?
Governance is very essential because see, if there are say, biases in the data itself, right? And if there's not a proper bias policy, say like EXL has developed the AI bias framework and so as to ascertain responsible AI. So if there are no like policies or set of procedures that what is acceptable and what is not, then it might lead to issues eventually in the model, and it may lead to lack of adoption. So from that aspect, other aspects are like various things around access controls, encryption of data, authentication, even traceability of the model. All of these aspects have to be seen when a model is being built or operationalized in the MLOps mechanism. So these are some of the things that currently come to my mind. And even one more in terms of creating the whole committee for governance. So which ascertains that each stage of model lifecycle implementation, there's appropriate governance. And these can be in light of some of the government regulations, which may be GDPR, CCPA, HIPAA, in those terms, or it might be even there are vertical regulations in terms of financial model, regulatory models as well. So there also, so all of these things have to be kept into consideration, and therefore I think model governance is a very, very key pillar, I can say, of the whole model ops process.
Thank you, Swati. Gop, let me come to you. Because you are at Genpact and I believe you have a ringside view of this. How do you make a case for fast-paced adoption then in Indian enterprises for this?
Well, it is in basically the Indian market, right? In the last couple of years, we have seen a tremendous amount of data growth, actually, right? Or I will say digitization in the true sense, right? I'm not sure whether it is because of the COVID or it is of the need of looking into the data, because when we have seen the earlier Indian market, since most of our business are not very organized, right? We used to have very less amount of data which is available, right? But with more digitization, we see a lot of data which is available, right? And they are, I will not say that they are 100% structured and 100% of high quality data, but I think the data which is available, which is very good enough, right? Yeah. And we have seen that the industry is also trying to implement in many cases, especially, the Indian pharma, industry, they are trying to implement, AI ML in various of their use cases, right? And that is a very good sign, I will say, right? Because the earlier issue was availability of data, unavailability of data, unavailability of digitized framework, unavailability of structured process. I think that is something which has changed, right? I think now we have a quite structured process, even in the Indian market or Indian industry as such. Lot of data to look into, right? There are frameworks which is available, right? Through which you can, deliver those things. So I think those things are changing, and I see that there are a lot of opportunity for, MLOps, even if it is not in the current state, but in the near future to be implemented in, in the Indian market.
Thank you, Gopan. Let's end this with a positive point.
Yeah, just to
Swati,
add
1 second. Let me just go to Sanjay. 1 second. We are going to end this. So just, sorry. Okay. Sanjay, what do you think would be the future of MLOps in this case? Gop mentioned about the fast-paced adoption. What is your view in terms of the future and the adoption coming up?
I think, very specific for the India market, as Gop also mentioned, the amount of digitization and availability of good quality data. And there are various industry verticals who are picking it up. We've been in discussions with domestic banks, as part of the work that we do along with NASSCOM, and they're looking at plethora of use cases, right from KYC to anti-money laundering, and there is good and rich quality of data, credit risk management. So these are all good quality of data which is available. So one is availability of good quality data, process standardization, process governance, strong process governance. Another interesting thing, Vaishnavi, that came out in discussions also is, centralizing this entire MLOps initiative, because traditionally most of the organization used to run these AI ML use cases in small pockets, at a department or a BU level. Now with a lot of emphasis from senior management where they see value of running these models, they are looking at more and more investments also, and trying to centralize the entire initiative. So you create a core team which is going to pick up various models, pick up SMEs. So it's like a typical, in the old times where you actually ran an ERP implementation, where you had a core team, which was investment was centralized, and then you had various SMEs and POCs who were kind of involved in the implementation. So I think that's another interesting trend we've seen that is happening in the domestic market. So I think it's a matter of time when this will move to mainstream rather than just running as small pilot.
Absolutely, and we are gunning for it. And he made some interesting points about money laundering and how these implementations can come in. And as I said, the finance sector has always looked for innovation, stood for innovation, and hopefully this solves a lot of the gaps that are in the enterprises today. Swati gave us a very good point about training the models and how we have to be mindful of biases, and MLOps actually comes into picture then. And Bob, of course, gave us the need for governance, implementation pillars, and he was the first one who gave us the definition and what gaps in the enterprises it addresses. It was a very insightful panel, and thank you so much for taking time out and giving us a broad view of what MLOps means and how it will solve for enterprises in the coming days. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It was an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.